On Father's Day, they gave me a $5 lottery ticket and a smirk, and I thanked them like it was gold. The cheap card said, "Maybe your luck will change," in glitter that came off on my fingers. Across the table, my daughter's father-in-law lifted a ribboned envelope to the light, like it contained salvation. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. We were at the Harbor Grill on East Bay Street in Charleston, South Carolina, Sunday, June the 16th. The sort of place where the tablecloths are so white you hesitate to set your glass down. I counted 3 wine waiters, 2 busboys, and 1 tide clock mounted above the bar, clicking toward high water. The smell of broiled sea bass drifted through the clink of cutlery. I could hear the kitchen printer spitting orders, staccato, impatient. "Open yours, Dad," my daughter Anna said. Her smile was careful, like it had been coached. I slipped the card out of its blue envelope. Inside, a single scratcher was taped at an angle. "Low Country Lucky. $5. I smoothed the tape edge with my thumb and nodded. "Thoughtful," I said. My voice stayed steady, but I felt the bruise form under it. "Now yours, Richard," she sang, turning to her father-in-law. He untied a navy ribbon and slid out a black leather folio. His eyebrows rose. Delighted theater. "A 10-day Mediterranean cruise," he announced, head tilted so the gold-embossed itinerary caught the chandelier. "Suite, private balcony, priority embarkation. Barcelona, Naples, Santorini." He reached for his glass. "A family tradition of generosity." Laughter fluttered, small and mean. My son-in-law, Daniel, patted my shoulder like I was a well-behaved customer in his shop. "It's the thought that counts, right?" he said. I turned the ticket over, reading the fine print while a server refreshed my ice water with a silver pitcher. Odds of winning any prize, 1 in 4.3. I slid the ticket back into the envelope, tucked it into the inside pocket of my old blue blazer, and forced a smile. My late wife would have squeezed my hand under the table. Since she died 3 years ago in April, I've learned to hold my own fingers steady. The check arrived on a small silver tray, $689.50 before tip. Richard caught the number and chuckled. "I've got it," he declared, like a magician producing a dove. Anna beamed at him the way she used to beam at me when she brought home an A in chemistry. I left my credit card in my wallet and my pride on the linen. We stepped out into the heavy evening heat. The harbor was a dark sheet beyond the parking lot, dotted with masked lights. Anna kissed my cheek. "It was a joke, Dad. You know how he is." "I know," I said. The joke felt like a small stone lodged behind my ribs. At home, the quiet met me at the door like an old dog. I placed the receipt on my kitchen counter, next to a stack of envelopes with red-stamped warnings. I underlined the date on the restaurant copy, June 16th, and slipped it into the top drawer. "Every receipt is a story," my wife used to say. "Some are IOUs for respect." I set the blue envelope on the table and stared at it. In the humming glow of the refrigerator, I scratched the ticket with a quarter from 1971, my first summer job year, the one where I learned to fix anything with wire and patience. The card yielded nothing but silver dust, and the word, "try again." I laughed, quiet and raw. Not at the loss, at the arithmetic of it. Richard got the cruise. I got the coin rub. The next morning, Monday, I drove to the Sunoco off Route 17. The cash drawer thunked open. I withdrew $40 from my bank. There's a slip in my wallet still, dated May 15th, when I first started buying 1 stray ticket a month, a private habit I never admitted. I asked the clerk for the same series as the one Anna had taped into my card. "Same game, same row," I told her. I folded the new ticket into my pocket, walked out into the heat, and felt something tilt in the world, the way a sailboat lists before the wind catches. I didn't know it yet, but humiliation had just turned into fuel. That night, the quiet in my kitchen felt heavier than the June heat pressing against the windows. The house still smelled faintly of lemon oil and loneliness. On the counter sat the Father's Day card, the blue envelope curled at the edges like it was ashamed of itself. The scratcher lay beside it, a dull gray smudge across its surface. "Try again." I poured myself a glass of sweet tea, though it had long gone bitter, and sat at the table I built with my own hands 34 years ago. The same table where Anna used to do her math homework. The same table where my wife, Caroline, once spread the bills out like a battle map. I reached for her old folder of statements. Wells Fargo, utilities, the retirement account that had been shrinking like melting ice. There it was, the red stamp across last month's bill. Past due $398.27. I ran my thumb over it. "You'd have laughed at that dinner, Caroline," I whispered. "You'd have called it theater." Around 9, I noticed the blue envelope again. A small insult can echo louder than a big one when it comes from your own blood. I didn't know whether it was pride or habit that made me open my laptop and look up the lottery draw schedule. The power pick numbers had rolled that morning, but there was still a late-night quick pick game. I grabbed my wallet. The gas station off Route 17 stayed open until midnight. The clerk recognized me from earlier that day. She had that half-interested smile of someone who's seen too many people chasing miracles. "Back again, Mr. Weston?" she asked. "Couldn't sleep," I said. "Give me another shot at disappointment." She slid the ticket across the counter. I gave her 2 20s. I remember the receipt printer jamming, and she had to tear the paper by hand. "June 17th, she said, scribbling the date with her pen. Lucky day for somebody. When I got home, I laid the ticket next to the one Anna had given me. 2 pieces of glossy cardboard, both promising what life rarely delivered. Fairness. I didn't scratch it. Not yet. I left it there on the counter while I brushed my teeth and stared at my reflection. A man still waiting for an apology that would never come. The next morning, sunlight sliced through the blinds and hit the edge of the counter. I picked up the ticket, flipped it over once, then took a quarter from the dish by the sink. The same one I used to give Anna for bubble gum after Sunday school. As the silver dust flaked away, my eyes blurred. The first number matched, then the second, then all of them. For a long time, I thought I was reading it wrong. I held the card under the light again. The small black print didn't change. At the Sunico that afternoon, I handed it to the same clerk. She scanned it once, frowned, scanned again. Then her hand went still. "Sir," she said softly, "you might want to sit down." The register screen flashed in all caps. Jackpot winner, $120,000. I walked outside with the ticket pinched between 2 fingers like it might dissolve. The humidity hit me full in the chest. Across the road, the American flag over the hardware store hung limp in the still air. For the next 10 minutes, I sat in my car and listened to the sound of my pulse in my ears. That's when I knew this wasn't just a win. It was a weapon. I didn't call Anna. I didn't call anyone. Instead, I drove to the old public library where Caroline used to volunteer. It was quiet, cool, smelled of dust and pine cleaner. I sat in a corner booth and wrote 1 sentence on a notepad. They laughed when I lost. Let's see how they handle my luck. That night, I called Tommy Reed, my wife's nephew, a small-town attorney from Somerville. "Tommy," I said, "I need to ask you a favor, and I need you to keep it quiet." He hesitated. "How quiet?" "Vault quiet." "Then you've got me," he said. "What's going on?" "I came into something big," I said, "and I want to make sure I keep it." There was a pause, the sound of papers shifting on his desk. "Uncle Harold, if you don't protect yourself, they'll circle you like buzzards. You know that, right?" "I know," I said. "That's why I'm calling you before I call anyone else." When I hung up, I took out a legal pad and began listing every detail. The date, the gas station, the clerk's name, even the time printed on the receipt. June 17th, 10:42 p.m. I folded the lottery ticket into a plastic sleeve and slipped it into the envelope that once held the scratcher from Anna. Same blue paper, same crooked edge. The irony didn't escape me. By midnight, I'd locked the envelope in my small fireproof safe, the one that used to hold Caroline's jewelry. I looked around my kitchen. Everything was the same. The clock still ticking above the doorway, the faint hum of the fridge. But I wasn't. Some men win the lottery and lose themselves in the noise. I decided to disappear in the quiet. And that's when my plan began to form. The morning after the win, Charleston was already waking to its usual rhythm. Gulls screaming over the harbor, sprinklers clicking in the gardens along East Bay, the smell of salt and magnolia thick in the air. I sat at my kitchen table with a pad of yellow paper, a cold cup of coffee, and a secret that felt too large to fit inside my old house. I wasn't going to be one of those fools you see on the evening news, smiling, holding a cardboard check, and then bankrupt a year later. I'd seen too many good men lose what they couldn't even name: privacy, peace, dignity. Tommy called just after 8. "I didn't sleep," he said. "Uncle Harold, you really won that money?" I did. "Then listen to me carefully. Don't tell a soul. Not Anna, not Daniel, not anyone. We'll form a trust. We'll call it Harbor Light Holdings, after Aunt Caroline's lighthouse obsession. You'll stay the manager, but your name won't be public." "Sounds like you've done this before," I said. "I've done the cleanup after people didn't," he said. We met that afternoon at his small law office in Somerville, a brick building wedged between a dentist and an insurance agency. He closed the blinds, poured 2 coffees, and slid a single-page form across the desk. "We start here. You're going to open 3 accounts under the LLC. 1 savings, 1 investment, 1 for charity. Keep the paper trail clean." He was meticulous. I was grateful. By the time we finished the paperwork, my head was spinning. The idea that I was now worth $120 million sat somewhere between absurd and holy. I used to check the thermostat before bed to save on power. Now I was signing documents with more zeros than I'd seen in my life. When I left Tommy's office, I stopped at the Wells Fargo branch on King Street. The manager recognized me. Small towns remember their regulars. "Mr. Weston, everything all right?" she asked. "Better than it's been in a long time," I said, and handed her a deposit slip. "Just moving some funds around." That night, I heard from Anna for the first time since the Father's Day dinner. "Dad," she said, her voice crackling through the line. "You've been quiet. Everything okay?" "Just busy with a few things," I said. "You're not sick, are you?" "No, just thinking about the future," she laughed softly. "That's new." Her tone stung more than I wanted to admit. The same girl who used to bring me wildflowers from the backyard now spoke like she was humoring a patient. I told her I loved her before hanging up. She didn't say it back. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived in the mailbox. Heavy paper, embossed logo, Hale Development Group, Richard's company. Inside was an invitation printed in silver ink. Golf and business luncheon. Hale Country Club, Friday, July 5th. I didn't play golf, but I knew why I was invited. Someone had talked. Maybe Daniel. Maybe Anna. In Charleston, secrets ripple through water like oil. When I showed up at the club, Richard greeted me with that politician's smile. Teeth white as a lie. "Harold, heard you've had a stroke of good fortune." "I've had better summers," I said. He clapped my back. "Let's talk about what comes next for you. A man your age doesn't want to be burdened by management." Over lunch, he steered the conversation like a salesman circling a car he already planned to buy cheap. "You know, my firm could help you. Invest wisely. Protect your assets." I stirred my iced tea and watched condensation drip down the glass. "You think I need protecting?" "Everyone does," he said. "Especially when they're new to real money." When I didn't answer, he leaned closer, his cologne thick and sharp. "You give me access to your holdings, Harold, and I'll triple your earnings in a year. You'll thank me later. I smiled, slow and polite. You might be right, Richard. I'll think about it. That night, I sat in my car outside my house and recorded a voice memo on my phone. Richard's exact words echoed back through the speaker. You give me access to your holdings, Harold. I played it twice, then saved it under a new folder called Hail. The next morning, Tommy notarized the transcript of that memo. Keep this in your safe, he said. If he tries anything, it's proof of coercion. Proof, I repeated. Caroline used to say that word whenever she balanced the checkbook. Proof keeps you honest. In the weeks that followed, I built my walls higher. I bought a small safety deposit box at Wells Fargo, box 2117A, for my trust documents and the original ticket. I memorized every key number, every passcode. My name appeared nowhere on the LLC papers. Harborlight Holdings became my armor. Then, one morning in late July, I drove past the Hale construction offices downtown and saw Richard's new billboard, Building Charleston's Future. His grin on the poster looked just like the one he wore at dinner. I pulled over, rolled down my window, and whispered to myself, You've built enough futures, Richard. Let's see what happens when one of them collapses. Revenge wasn't anger anymore. It was engineering, slow, precise, and lawful. And I was just getting started. When I say I played it slow, I mean I moved with the patience of a man who's learned the cost of acting fast. Revenge, in my case, was paperwork, not fireworks. It was bank slips and affidavits and the quiet accumulation of irrefutable details. It was boring. And that's what made it lethal. The first piece fell into place on a humidity-thick morning in late July. I met Richard at a coffee shop off King Street. Not the country club this time, something more neutral, with formica tables and a counter that smelled of burnt beans. He came with a folder, the same practiced smile, and a proposal that would have made any accountant's eyes roll with glee. You invest $5 million in a new waterfront project, Harold. My firm handles the development. We split profits and I handle everything. Minimal risk. He tapped a page. The numbers looked correct at first glance. Revenue projections with bolded returns, a projected net of $42 million in 2 years. I asked him a simple question. Where's the escrow? He waved his hand. We'll set it up once you sign the letter of intent. You don't need to worry about the mechanics. His pen hovered like a hawk. Trust me, let me do what I do best. There's a phrase Tommy used that echoed in my head. Always ask for the paperwork now, not later. I declined politely. I asked instead for a copy of their audited financials and references from their other investors. He bristled, but let loose another sales line. We can always discuss it over dinner. Family deals go easier that way. That night I photocopied the pages he'd shown me. The projections were glossy, but the footnotes were thin. A red flag I underlined in green ink. I slipped the photocopies into my Harborlight file and made a note. July 28th, coffee shop. 5 minutes-esque. Ask for escrow details. Query valuation footnotes. If Richard wanted to be bold enough to propose joint ventures on my money, then I would be bold enough to let the law do its job. Under Tommy's direction, I filed a preliminary consumer complaint with the South Carolina Department of Consumer Affairs on July 30th. It wasn't an indictment, yet, but it put a marker down. Someone was seeking a large investment under vague terms. The complaint referenced the exact numbers he'd given me at the coffee shop and attached photocopies of the glossy proposal. Tommy wrote the cover letter. I signed it with a hand that didn't tremble. I didn't stop there. I created pressure where pressure belonged. The ledger. I transferred $2 million from Harborlight's investment account into an educational trust in Caroline's name. The notation on the Wells Fargo transfer read, Caroline Weston Memorial Scholarship. Education Fund, 0802. I printed the bank confirmation and tucked it into box 217A at Wells Fargo. The tool, same box where the original lottery ticket and the LLC papers rested. The scholarship was a statement. The money was going someplace useful, not into some developer's pocket. Richard continued to circle. He called one evening on my landline, a voice I'd never liked on a speaker. "Harold, you're making this more complicated than it needs to be. Let me help you manage it." I let the line run for a minute and recorded the exchange on my phone. A simple voice memo labeled, "Hail, call Bart Wodo 806. Tommy told me later that that memo, combined with the coffee shop notes and the filed complaint, would make a tidy paper trail if anyone tried to claim coercion or predatory tactics. One of my quieter moves involved the charity I'd bankrolled. I made sure the scholarship was public, not flashy, but traceable. On August 5th, I arranged for a local community college to announce the Caroline Weston Memorial Scholarship. They mailed me a printed letter of acknowledgement dated August 7th, campus letterhead, signature of the dean, and a note that the scholarship would support 2 students with $10,000 each annually. I received calls from people who'd been helped by the college. I saved everyone in an envelope marked Charity, AUG 2025. Richard's arrogance grew with each attempt to butter me up. He circulated a draft investment agreement through his assistant on August 11th, filled with inflated valuations and ambiguous payout schedules. It landed in my mailbox like a dare. I fed the draft to Tommy. He called 2 days later, voice low. "This document? It's a classic predatory structure. Hidden fees, transfer clauses that let him take control. If he presents this to any elder who's not been advised, it's fraud waiting to happen." We prepared for the fall. Tommy drafted a formal letter to be sent to Richard's firm. Not accusatory, but cautionary. It demanded transparent escrow arrangements, audited financial statements, and a certified independent appraisal of the waterfront project's assets. The letter was sent certified mail on August 14th, and the return receipt arrived 3 days later, stamped and signed. I slipped that slip into Box 217A as well. Certified mail, Hale Development, 0814, signed by M. Collins. All along, I kept my public face steady. I played the grateful, slightly befuddled father who'd been given a gag gift. I let Anna fold into the role of the daughter, who worried about her father making foolish choices. Their underestimation was my advantage. They assumed a man who accepted a $5 ticket joke was harmless. The trap I'd built wasn't dramatic. It was composed of bank slips, notarized memos, certified letters, public scholarship announcements, and the simple act of not being greedy in front of people who counted on my silence. I learned something in those weeks. The law moves slow, but it moves with certainty. And Richard, with his billboards and suits, didn't see it coming. He kept smiling, kept offering to manage my money, not realizing his own words would be the mortar that held my case together. I ended the month watching the Hale billboard on King Street as a car passed by, the headlights painting Richard's grin into a brief, pale smear. I closed my blinds and made my list for what came next. More documentation, an affidavit, if necessary, and the one public moment that would make the whole city stop and listen. Rising tension needed one thing: a stage. I chose Anna's family reunion dinner in August. If I was right, that night would change everything. By the time August rolled around, the heat in Charleston felt personal, like the city itself was testing who could endure it longest. The air hung thick and still, and so did the silence between me and Anna. She'd stopped calling except to send polite text messages. "Hope you're doing okay, Dad." I always replied, "Doing fine." But beneath that calm, the pot was simmering. Richard had pushed too far, too fast. His confidence grew in direct proportion to the pressure I'd built under his feet. It started with a lunch meeting at the Harbor Club. He showed up late, sweating through his pressed shirt, but still smiling like a man convinced of his own invincibility. "You've been ignoring my calls," he said, sliding into the booth. "I've been busy," I replied, taking a sip of my sweet tea. "Money keeps me up at night." "That's what I'm here for," he said, lowering his voice. "You're sitting on a fortune you don't understand. I can protect it for you, for Anna's sake." He made it sound noble. That's what made it revolting. I set down my glass. "I'll think about it," I said, his eyes sharpened. "Think too long, and the market moves without you." When the waitress dropped off the check, I slipped my card in before he could reach for his. The total was $86.40, a small victory, but symbolic. I wanted him to feel just a pinch of humility. That night, I called Tommy. "He's getting restless," I said. Tommy sighed. "Good. The louder he gets, the easier it'll be to catch his voice on tape." "You sound like you've done this before." "I've watched greed record its own confession plenty of times." 2 days later, Richard confronted me in public. It was at a restaurant near Waterfront Park, just after lunch rush. He stormed up to my table, voice low but sharp enough to slice through the chatter. "You're playing games, old man," he said. "Do you think money makes you smart?" I kept my tone level. "No, Richard, but it sure makes you reveal who's stupid." He leaned closer, his hand gripping the table edge. "You'll regret this," I smiled. "I've regretted worse." He left in a huff, but not before a few diners turned to look. One of them recorded a snippet on their phone. I saw the reflection of the camera lens in the window. Funny thing about public arrogance, it always leaves witnesses. That same evening, Anna showed up at my door. Her face was pale, her hair tied back in that way she used to do when she was upset as a teenager. "Dad, what's going on with you and Richard?" "He said you're threatening him." I laughed, dry. "Threatening him? That's rich." I reached for a folder on the counter. The draft contract Richard had sent. The one with falsified valuations. I laid it flat in front of her. "See that figure?" I pointed to the inflated property line. A waterfront lot he valued at triple its actual worth. He signed that. Correction fluid and all. You can still see the old number underneath. She stared at it. Then her lip trembled. "I didn't know." "I know you didn't," I said softly. "But you needed to." She sat down, eyes wet. "Please don't make this worse. Just let it go. He's family now." "Family," I repeated, almost to myself. "Family doesn't sell you out for interest rates." Before she left, I said one last thing. "Don't tell Daniel yet. Let's see who he's loyal to, his father or his wife." After she was gone, I recorded my thoughts in a notebook I'd begun calling the ledger. Each entry had a date, a receipt, and a reason. August 4th, Richard confrontation at Waterfront Park Cafe. Check total, $24.85. Witnesses observed argument. August 6th, Anna visit. Showed contract draft. Emotional reaction genuine. The notebook wasn't just for me. It was for the court that would one day read it. Every detail mattered. The price of coffee. The pause before a lie. As the days passed, Tommy and I prepared affidavits, piecing together the timeline. The Department of Consumer Affairs had already acknowledged my complaint, and an investigator had quietly contacted me for follow-up documentation. "Keep your mouth shut and your proof neat," Tommy said. "You're building a bridge to justice. Don't step on it before it's finished." Meanwhile, Anna sent a text on August 10th. "Dinner at the Hales next week. Family reunion. Please come. It would mean a lot." There it was. The invitation I'd been waiting for. The perfect stage, I replied simply, "I'll be there." Then I called Tommy and told him to prepare copies of every document. Notarized. Time-stamped. Clean. He asked, "You're really going to do it at the dinner?" "Yes," I said. "You ever notice how the truth tastes better when it's served warm?" The night before the event, I stood in my living room, staring at the file folder on my coffee table. Transcripts, certified letters, and that one voice recording labeled Hail Call OE806. I pressed play once, listened to Richard's smug tone one last time, then turned off the phone. "Tomorrow," I said aloud, "we balance the books. Because sometimes revenge doesn't come from rage. It comes from perfect accounting." The day of the dinner began with the kind of stillness Charleston only gets before a storm. The sky hung low and yellow, the air thick enough to chew. I woke early, ironed my best blue blazer, the one with the faint crease at the shoulder from Caroline's last touch, and laid the folder beside it. A neat stack of documents that could drown an empire. By 4:30, I'd reviewed every page one last time. There was the notarized transcript of Richard's management offer, the certified mail receipts from Hale Development, the email trail between Tommy and the Consumer Affairs Office, the voice memo transcribed on his letterhead, all proof, all lawful. I tucked the folder into a leather briefcase that once carried circuit blueprints when I still worked as an engineer. Same care, same precision. Anna's message came at 5:15. Dinner starts at 7. Dress smart. Press invited. Richard wants to announce something big. I smiled at that. Of course he did. The Hales never missed a chance to perform their generosity. By 7 sharp, I pulled into the long drive of the Hale estate. 3 acres of manicured ego wrapped in floodlights and azaleas. The valet took my keys with a look that said, my car didn't belong there. I didn't correct him. Inside, chandeliers glowed like captive suns. I counted 35 guests. Bankers, local journalists, city officials, and a few familiar faces from the Father's Day dinner. The same ones who'd laughed when I scratched my losing ticket. A string quartet played near the staircase. Waiters circulated with trays of champagne. And at the far end of the dining room, Richard Hale held court. White suit, gold cufflinks, and that permanent half-smile that always meant he thought he'd already won. "Harold," he called, loud enough for half the room to hear. "Glad you made it, my friend. I was just telling our guests about your little windfall." I shook his hand. Firm, deliberate. "Always good to see you, Richard." He leaned in. "We're announcing a partnership tonight. Hale Development and Weston Holdings." He winked. Surprise! Weston Holdings. A name he'd invented, apparently for me. I felt the corners of my mouth lift. That is a surprise. Dinner began with speeches. His wife toasted family unity. Anna looked nervous. Daniel kept checking his phone. And I sat quietly at the long table, my briefcase resting by my leg. The silverware clinked like typewriter keys. Then Richard stood, glass raised. Cameras pointed at him. "Tonight," he began, "we celebrate not just our family, but the power of trust and mentorship. Harold Weston here, a man of integrity, has chosen to work with us to ensure his legacy grows alongside ours. Together, we're announcing the Coastal Vision Fund, a joint philanthropic venture worth," he paused for effect, $20 million. Applause. Flashbulbs. A reporter leaned forward, pen poised. I rose slowly, pushing my chair back across the marble floor. "Richard," I said, "I'd like to make a small correction." The room stilled. Forks froze. Anna's eyes widened. "I never agreed to any partnership," I continued. "And if we're talking about integrity, perhaps the guests would like to see what your mentorship looks like on paper." I lifted the briefcase onto the table, unlatched it, and spread the documents like a dealer laying down a royal flush. The top sheet bore his signature, the same one from his falsified investment draft, the correction fluid mark still visible beneath the ink. "This," I said, tapping the page, "is the deal he proposed. One that would have transferred $5 million of my money into his control under fraudulent valuations." A murmur swept the table. Cameras clicked. Richard's smile faltered. "Harold, this isn't the place." "Oh, I think it's exactly the place," I said. "You invited the press." I pulled another sheet from the stack. the notarized transcript of our coffee shop meeting. Here's where you said, "You give me access to your holdings, Harold, and I'll handle everything." Here's the voice memo, date stamped and verified. And here, I lifted the Department of Consumer Affairs acknowledgement, is the official record of the complaint filed 2 weeks ago. You might want to check tomorrow's mail. I hear subpoenas travel fast. Gasps erupted. Someone's wine glass slipped, shattering. Anna pressed her hand to her mouth. Richard tried to laugh, but it came out brittle. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, I do, I said. Because I kept every receipt, every draft, every promise you made when you thought I was too old to understand what you were doing. I turned to the reporters. Ask him about the Coastal Vision Fund. Ask him if the money was ever his to give. One journalist, the city business editor, stood up. Mr. Hale, is this true? Richard's face drained. This is slander. Actually, I said, pulling the final envelope from my briefcase, it's evidence. I handed it directly to the journalist. Inside were the notarized copies, the audio transcript, and Tommy's legal summary of events. Consider this a courtesy, I said. The Attorney General's office will have their own packet by morning. Silence spread like oil on water. Even the quartet had stopped playing. Richard's wife whispered, Richard, what did you do? Anna stared at him, then at me. Dad, is all this… I met her eyes. Every word. She stood slowly, backing away from the table. Daniel followed, confused, muttering something about damage control, and then, like a perfect final note, thunder cracked outside. Loud enough to rattle the chandeliers. The power flickered once, then steadied. I gathered my papers, slid them back into the briefcase, and buttoned my blazer. Dinner's over, I said quietly. No one stopped me as I walked to the door. Cameras flashed behind me, voices rose, and somewhere in the confusion, I heard Richard shouting my name, but I didn't turn back. Outside, the rain had started. Big, deliberate drops. The valet ran up with an umbrella, but I waved him off. I didn't need cover. By the time I reached my car, I could already see the glow of phones lighting up inside the mansion. The first reporter was tweeting. The headline would hit the local feed within the hour. Charleston developer accused of coercion and fraud in 120 million lottery scandal. I sat behind the wheel, the briefcase on the passenger seat, and listened to the rain thrum against the windshield. My hands were steady. At exactly 9:43 p.m., my phone buzzed, Tommy's number. You did it, didn't you? He said. I just told the truth, I replied. He laughed. You don't need to lift a finger now. The press will do the rest. As I drove away, lightning lit up the road ahead, sharp, white, and clean. For the first time since that Father's Day dinner, I felt the air in my lungs come easy. Some storms you don't run from. You walk right through them, let them wash the lies away. Tomorrow would bring fallout, and I was ready for it. By dawn, Charleston was already buzzing. My phone, normally silent, lit up like a Christmas tree. The news had broken overnight. Not just the local feed this time, but national. Prominent developer under investigation for fraudulent dealings with lottery winner. The photo they used was from the dinner. Me standing with my briefcase half open, Richard's face caught mid-blink, looking like a man who'd just realized the ground beneath him wasn't solid. I brewed coffee and watched the morning news through the reflection in my kitchen window. The anchor's voice was calm, but her words carried the crack of judgment. Sources confirm that a Charleston retiree, recently revealed as a $120 million lottery winner, submitted notarized documents alleging coercion and misrepresentation by real estate mogul Richard Hale. I turned the volume down. Justice sounded best at low volume. Tommy called at 8:03. The Attorney General's office confirmed they received our packet. They'll open an inquiry today. And, Harold, you're officially a whistleblower now. Never thought I'd wear that title at my age, I said. Better than being a victim, he replied. Before we hung up, he added, you did it by the book. That's what'll save you. At 8:30, my front gate buzzed. It was Anna. She stood there in a raincoat over her nightdress, hair damp, eyes rimmed red. I hadn't seen her look that young in years. Dad, she said, voice trembling. What have you done? I opened the gate and let her in. Made sure no one ever laughs at me with a $5 ticket again. She sank into one of the kitchen chairs. The media's everywhere. They're outside the house. Richard's lost 3 contracts overnight. Daniel's furious. He said, you've ruined us. Ruined us? I repeated, half laughing. I didn't steal anything. I didn't lie. I kept receipts, literal receipts, of what your father-in-law tried to do. I warned you weeks ago. She looked at her hands. I wanted to believe he was better than that. He's not, I said softly. He's just louder. She started to cry. I didn't know he planned to use your money, Dad. I swear. I believed her. Or at least part of her. Grief doesn't always come from loss. Sometimes it comes from realization. When she left, she hugged me tight. They'll hate you for this, she whispered. I've been hated before, I said. I can live with it. By noon, the Hale estate was swarmed. Helicopters thumped overhead. Reporters clustered by the wrought iron gates, shouting questions at every passing car. The same people who once smiled for the Hale's charity galas now wanted blood. At 2, my phone buzzed again, a number I didn't recognize. It was a detective from the Attorney General's office. Mr. Weston, we'd like to schedule a formal statement. You've provided compelling evidence of coercion. We'd also like copies of the original recordings. They're notarized and archived, I said. When and where? Tomorrow, 9 a.m., downtown. See you then. That evening, I took a walk along the harbor. The sunset painted the water in gold, the same color as the ticket that started it all. A few people recognized me from the news. One older man nodded as I passed. You did good, he said quietly. Just did what was right, I answered. He smiled. Same thing, most days. At home, I opened box 217A and checked my documents again. Everything was still there. The affidavits, the memos, the receipts. Caroline's scholarship papers sat on top, a reminder of what this was really for. The following day in court, I took the stand. The room smelled of paper, polish, and consequence. Richard sat 2 tables away, pale and furious, his lawyers whispering like hornets. The prosecutor played the audio recording aloud. You give me access to your holdings, Harold, and I'll handle everything. My own voice followed, steady and quiet. You mean you'll handle my money? The courtroom murmured. Richard's lawyer objected. Overruled. Then they read from the contract draft, the inflated property valuations, the altered figures. Line by line, his empire cracked like old plaster. When it was my turn to speak, the judge asked if I had anything to add. Yes, I said. Just one thing. You can build houses on lies, but they don't stand through the first storm. Richard didn't look at me. His wife sobbed quietly behind him. Anna sat near the back, tears streaking down her cheeks. The judge nodded. Mr. Hale, until these charges are resolved, all assets under Hale Development are frozen pending review. Mr. Weston, thank you for your cooperation. The gavel struck wood, sharp and final. Outside, the courthouse steps were packed with reporters. One shoved a mic in my face. Mr. Weston, why go public? You could have handled this privately. I adjusted my hat. Private theft deserves public light, I said, and walked past them. The next morning, the headlines shifted again. Elderly lottery winner's evidence triggers indictment. Whistleblower hero or vindictive millionaire. Let them argue about the label. I slept soundly for the first time in months. Richard's company bled out over the next few weeks. His investors pulled out. His accounts were seized. Every contract under Hale Development went under audit. Daniel filed for bankruptcy by September. One afternoon, Anna came to see me again. She sat on the porch steps, eyes softer this time. "I don't know how to fix any of this," she said. "Maybe you don't have to," I told her. "Some things just have to finish breaking before they can be rebuilt." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "You're still my dad," she said quietly. "I was never anything else," I said. After she left, I poured myself a glass of sweet tea. The good kind this time, strong and cold. I looked out over the yard, where Caroline's rose bushes had finally started blooming again. The world hadn't changed much, but I had. The difference was that now, when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a man who'd been humiliated by a $5 joke. I saw the man who turned that joke into Judgment Day. And sometimes, that's all the redemption you get. Knowing that the people who once dismissed you now have to live with the sound of their own names falling apart. Tomorrow would bring the headlines, the interviews, the legal paperwork. But tonight, the air smelled like rain again, and I let it wash over me like forgiveness. Because revenge, done right, doesn't just punish, it restores. Charleston's courthouse always looked too beautiful for the things it held. White columns, oak doors, sunlight spilling through stained glass. A cathedral for broken promises. When I returned there 2 weeks later, it wasn't as a victim or a whistleblower. It was as a man watching the balance finally settle. The courtroom buzzed quietly that morning. Reporters lined the benches, pens ready. I wore the same blue blazer from Father's Day. Pressed, mended, symbolic. On the table in front of me sat my briefcase, closed but heavy with everything that had brought us here. Transcripts, receipts, affidavits, truth. Richard Hale entered flanked by 2 attorneys. He looked smaller now, not in size, but in certainty. The tan from his golf weekends had faded, and the arrogance had drained out of his posture. When he saw me, he gave a tight smile, the kind a man gives when he realizes the fight's already over. The judge, stern, silver-haired, the kind of man who'd probably been underestimated once too, called the session to order. The charges were read aloud. Attempted fraud, coercion, misrepresentation. Each word landed like a hammer. Then came the part that will stay with me forever. The prosecutor stood, holding my old iPhone, the one that still contained the voice memo. He pressed play, and my kitchen filled the courtroom. The scrape of a chair leg, the clink of ice in a glass, and Richard's voice, smooth, confident, greedy. "You give me access to your holdings, Harold, and I'll handle everything." When the recording ended, the silence was heavier than any gavel. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Hale, did you or did you not make this offer under false pretenses?" Richard swallowed. "It was a misunderstanding." "Of course it was," I said softly. The judge glanced my way but didn't correct me. He didn't have to. Everyone in that room heard what wasn't being said. Then came my turn. The prosecutor asked if I wanted to give a statement. I rose, buttoned my blazer, and looked out at the faces staring back. Jurors, journalists, spectators. Some saw a lucky man. Others saw an old fool who got even. But I knew who I was. "I'm not here because I wanted revenge," I said. "I'm here because I wanted peace. There's a difference. This man tried to take what I'd earned, not because he needed it, but because he thought he could. People like him count on the quiet ones staying quiet. I'm here to remind them we don't have to." The judge nodded slowly. "Well said, Mr. Weston." By the end of the day, the verdict was clear. The court found probable cause for fraud and coercion. Hale Development's accounts remained frozen, pending further investigation. Richard's bail was set so high, even his partners couldn't reach it. When the gavel fell, it didn't sound like punishment. It sounded like closure. Outside, the courthouse steps glowed in late afternoon sun. Tommy waited for me by the fountain, tie loosened, eyes tired but satisfied. "You did it," he said. "You actually did it by the book," I smiled. Caroline used to say, "Don't fight dirty unless the dirt's yours to throw." I just kept it clean, he laughed. "You're the calmest avenger I've ever met. Revenge doesn't have to shout," I said. "It just has to stand." That evening, I met with the team from the Caroline Weston Memorial Scholarship. We finalized the first 2 recipients, both local students, both first-generation college kids. One of them, a boy named Marcus, said, "Thank you for believing in people like me, sir." I shook his hand. "I'm just returning what was taken. Respect." Later that week, I signed the papers establishing the Weston Foundation for Elder Legal Aid. Tommy drafted the mission statement himself. "For those who kept every receipt but lost every argument until now." I donated $5 million to launch it. Quietly, anonymously. The rest I left where it belonged. In trust, earning slow, honest interest. The press called me a hero, a crusader, even a symbol. They were wrong. I was just a man who refused to stay humiliated. On the first Sunday after the verdict, I visited Caroline's grave at Magnolia Cemetery. The roses had bloomed wild this year, spilling over the granite like spilled light. I laid a folded clipping of the newspaper at her stone. The headline read, "Justice for Harold Weston." "You'd have enjoyed that dinner scene," I told her. "You always did love a dramatic ending." The breeze off the river answered with the soft rustle of leaves. I took that as agreement. As I turned to leave, I caught my reflection in the polished marble of another monument. Older, darker, worn smooth by weather. For the first time, I didn't see regret in the lines of my face. I saw resolve. When I reached the car, my phone buzzed again. A reporter requesting one more interview. I ignored it. Some stories don't need retelling. Some are better left as warnings, because in the end, justice isn't loud. It's the sound of everything falling into place exactly where it should. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. A month passed before I really let myself breathe. Charleston had returned to its normal rhythm. Tourists by the water, church bells on Sundays, gulls arguing over scraps. But for me, everything moved slower, quieter, more deliberate. Every morning, I'd sit on my porch with a mug of coffee and watch the light creep over the harbor. The air smelled of salt and cut grass, and sometimes, if the wind shifted just right, I could almost hear Caroline humming from the kitchen, like she used to when life still had someone else's footsteps in it. People started recognizing me on the boardwalk. A few strangers nodded. 1 or 2 stopped to shake my hand. "You're that man who stood up to them," they'd say. I'd smile, thank them, but I never corrected them. They didn't need to know that standing up had taken more paperwork than courage. The truth is, I didn't feel like a hero. I felt emptied out, like all that quiet rage had burned away and left room for something new. Sometimes I'd drive out to the community college, the one where Caroline's scholarship now helped students. I'd park across the street, watch them spill out of class with their backpacks and plans, and think about how much good one honest dollar could do when it wasn't strangled by greed. One day, I walked inside. The receptionist recognized me and said, "Mr. Weston, we'd love for you to meet one of our scholarship students." A young woman came out, short hair, bright eyes, confidence just starting to bloom. "You're the reason I can finish nursing school," she said. "Thank you." I shook her hand, steady this time. "No, thank you," I said. "You're the proof the world still works if you hold it accountable." That night, I sat on my back porch under the same stars that once felt so far away when Caroline was gone. Now they seemed closer, almost familiar. I thought about Anna. We spoke now and then, careful, tentative. She'd separated from Daniel, was renting a small apartment near Mount Pleasant, teaching art again. She'd started mailing me postcards instead of texts. Hand-painted sketches of Charleston rooftops, waves, magnolias. I kept them all in a drawer beside the original blue envelope that once held my losing ticket. Funny thing, I could have thrown that envelope away, but I didn't. It reminded me that sometimes humiliation is just the down payment for respect. I took it out, turned it over in my hands, and smiled. That dinner, the laughter, the cruise, the $5 joke, felt like it belonged to another lifetime. I wasn't the same man who sat at that table swallowing pride with his dessert. I was older now, but in a way, younger too. Lighter, freer. I remembered what Tommy said after the court hearing. "You didn't win because you had money, Harold. You won because you had proof." He was right. Money changes numbers. Proof changes people. Before bed, I walked through my quiet house. The ticking clock, the faint hum of the fridge, the ordinary sounds that used to make me ache. Now they comforted me. Caroline's photo hung by the mantel. I touched the frame. "We did it right, didn't we?" I whispered. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly over the harbor. Not angry thunder, just distant, rolling, satisfied. I poured one last cup of tea and sat at the table, the same one where all this began. For a long moment, I said nothing. Because silence, when you've earned it, is the sweetest sound of all. In the months that followed, life found its way back into a rhythm. Slower, quieter, cleaner. The kind of rhythm you don't notice when you're fighting to be heard. Charleston turned cooler by late October. The live oaks dropped their leaves, and I learned the sound of peace again. The creak of my porch chair. The soft scrape of mail against the door. Anna called every Sunday now. No more formal tones. No more pretending everything was fine. Just real conversations. "Dad," she said once, "I started painting again." I forgot how much I loved it. "You didn't forget," I said. "You just stopped believing you had time?" She laughed. "You sound like Mom." "Good," I said. She was the smart one. Daniel never called. Last I heard, he'd filed for divorce and moved to Arizona. I didn't ask questions. Some absences don't need explaining. Richard Hale's name still floated around the news occasionally. Pre-trial motions, asset forfeiture, civil suits pending. But the photos told a clearer story. The man who once looked bulletproof now looked like someone who'd been introduced to gravity. I didn't take pleasure in it. Not exactly. Justice isn't joy, it's balance, and balance doesn't always smile. I spent more time at the beach house I'd bought quietly, a small place along Sullivan's Island. The ocean there had a way of reminding you how small your anger really is. Every morning I'd walk barefoot in the sand, coffee in hand, and think about how something as endless as the sea could still make room for closure. The Caroline Weston Foundation started gaining attention. Donations trickled in, not millions, but enough. Enough for older folks who'd been swindled or ignored to get a lawyer, a voice, a second chance. One woman, 78, called the office herself and said, "I heard what you did. I didn't know people our age still fought back." I told her, "We don't fight back. We stand up. It's quieter that way." Every week, I received a handwritten report from Tommy. 3 new cases opened. 2 settled in mediation, 1 in discovery. He was building something honest in my wife's name, and that meant more than every dollar still sitting in the bank. On a gray Friday in November, I stopped by the gas station off Route 17, the same Sunoco where I'd bought the winning ticket. The clerk was still there. She recognized me instantly. "You're the man who won big," she said, smiling. I grinned. "No, I'm the man who stopped pretending I'd lost." We both laughed. I bought a coffee and, on a whim, 1 more lottery ticket. Not to play, just to keep. I folded it carefully and slipped it into my wallet beside the old blue envelope from Father's Day. A reminder of how fast humiliation can turn into power if you stay patient long enough. That night, I sat on the porch as the sun fell behind the marsh. The air smelled of pine and salt. My house was quiet except for the rhythmic ticking of the old wall clock, the one Caroline used to wind every Sunday. I thought of everything that had happened, the laughter at the restaurant, the smirk across the table, the sound of the judge's gavel, each one a note in the same long song. Justice doesn't erase the past. It just gives it context. I leaned back in the chair, felt the boards creak beneath me, and smiled. "Good night, Caroline," I said softly. "You were right all along, and for once, I didn't feel the need to add anything more." A year later, Father's Day came around again. The calendar almost tricked me. I didn't even notice the date until I walked past the florist on Meeting Street and saw the display. Ties, mugs, cards that said "World's Greatest Dad." Funny how those words land differently after a storm. The morning was quiet. I made eggs and coffee, opened the curtains, and watched the harbor shimmer in summer light. The air smelled like warm salt and rain about to happen. I wasn't expecting visitors. Not anymore. Around 10, there was a knock at the door. It was Anna. She stood there with a paper bag in one hand and a small card in the other. "Happy Father's Day," she said softly. No big smile, no performance. Just her voice, steady, a little shy. "Come in," I said. We sat at the table, the same one where all of this began. She took out 2 sandwiches from the bag, set them on napkins, and slid the envelope across to me. "I didn't know what to get you," she said, "so I figured I'd let fate choose again." I opened the card. Inside was a single lottery ticket, new, crisp, uncreased. The words "Low Country Lucky" printed across the top. No tape this time. No joke. I looked up at her. She was smiling, but it wasn't the nervous kind. It was the kind her mother used to wear when she was proud. "I don't need to scratch it," I said. "I know," she replied. "That's kind of the point." We ate in comfortable silence for a while. She told me she'd moved into a small bungalow by the marsh, that she'd started painting landscapes again. "Mostly lighthouses," she said. I laughed at that. Caroline would have loved that, I told her. She used to say lighthouses aren't built to stop storms, just to prove you can survive them. Anna smiled. "You've become a lighthouse, Dad, whether you wanted to or not." After she left, I sat there with the card in my hands for a long time. The edges were already softening in the humidity. I ran my thumb over the ticket, the way I had that first night a lifetime ago, and thought about the road between those 2 moments. The humiliation, the quiet fury, the long, methodical patience that had turned a joke into justice. I found an old frame in the closet, dusted it off, and slid the card inside. Then I hung it on the wall above Caroline's photograph. Her laughing, head tilted toward the wind. The ticket caught the light from the window just right, like a small mirror. I whispered, "You didn't lose me. You gave me away." Outside, thunder rolled over the water again, soft and distant. I walked out onto the porch and watched the clouds gather. The air smelled clean, electric, alive. For a long time I stood there, hands in my pockets, listening to the first drops of rain tap the railing. People will say, I got lucky. They'll say the universe finally gave me a break. But luck had nothing to do with it. Luck scratches a ticket. Justice scratches back. I turned off the porch light, left the window open, and let the rain fall. The framed ticket gleamed faintly in the dark, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that even the smallest insult, in the right hands, can become a reckoning. And that sometimes, when life tries to make you the punchline, all you have to do is wait for the applause to fade. Then tell your story yourself. Because respect, once reclaimed, doesn't need an audience. It just needs to be true.